Greetings. Thank you for spending your afternoon here with us. I'm Robert Hachiya. I'm in the College of Education. I teach in the Department of Educational Leadership. And I am so highly caffeinated because I went to the Martin Luther King, and I was like, so if I have this glow, that's why. I went to the Distance Teaching and Learning Conference in Madison, Wisconsin. Anybody knows anything about Madison? It's a beautiful city. It's a huge university. It's a great place. This picture here is actually from a social event they had on the rooftop of where the conference was. And these people are, if you know anything about Wisconsin, it's a lot about beer, cheese, and polkas, and that is what they're doing right there. And it was quite fun. You can tell they're jumping in the air. So, as I said, I'm in educational leadership, and I teach primarily online, which is a major change. When I came here in 2012, there wasn't any of that going on, none. But we wouldn't have any students that are not in our leadership academies if I wasn't teaching and some other people teaching online. So that's a major change because most of our students at the master's level are in partner leadership academies with school districts like Manhattan and Salina and Topeka and Dodge City and Garden City and Shawnee Mission. They're there. No pun intended, we have all these other students that there are Wildcat students who are all over the place. This semester we're actually graduating, I have 4 students who are graduating, Kentucky, Virginia, Texas, and then only 1 from Kansas. So you see why it's important that we have this. So what we're doing is responding to this because what we've done is this patchwork of taking from 20 years ago or more programming, and we've been trying to put this online in, but it hasn't worked out like it should because we're not really offering them the way we could. And so we're currently planning a fully online master's degree. We're cutting our enrollments in this program right now. We're not taking any until we're going to start a whole online program that we're planning right now in 2021. So I went to this conference with this in mind, that I knew, well, this is when we're going to be doing this. Actually, I didn't know for sure we're going to be doing it, but I suspected we were. And so I went to multiple sessions, and they're kind of the same thing. A lot of them were, how to course design, and then I did do the stop giving me busy work because I felt guilty, and I thought, is that me? And so, but a lot of these are kind of similar. And then I went to these. You can read those, some of those. They were really, the recreational cell phone use. I went to that one because I teach educational law for principals, and so the cell phone is like the topic always. So I went to that. It wasn't quite what I thought it was going to be. Then the 5 strategies for effective and efficient online teaching, that hits home for a lot of us. So put this slide up here. Something significant about this number is 35. This is the 35th year for this conference. Okay, so if you think 35 years ago, probably their topics looked a lot different than they do now, obviously, but it's really distance teaching. So it has, and some of you may have been around long enough to maybe even attend a class where there was just a little squawk box, there's no video, you just sat there. That's kind of what that probably was similar to. But I also put this slide up here because I actually have all the papers, and I have a PDF of 300 pages of paper, conference papers if you'd like those. So I can send those to you if you contact me. So what I'm going to do is give a very, very brief highlight of the session that this person, she was absolutely outstanding. And I was the last one I went to, and I was so glad I went because it was the best one I went to. She was the greatest teacher, and as a former school principal, I thought this woman, she must have been the most outstanding middle school teacher ever, or high school teacher, because she was so good. And I actually embarrassed her, and I asked, at question time, I said, what kind of teacher were you before you did this? And she said, oh, I never have. So she was absolutely fabulous. I said, every principal in the country would hire you. And then it was strange that she said, I would be terrified. So, but she was great. So I'm going to give you some of these. She threw these out. I cannot do this any justice at all, because what she did is she spent a lot of time talking about the whys of all these. And some of it was research-based, a lot of it. And it was kind of geared towards people who do the online teaching and say, this is what you need to do, because here's what you're doing, here's what doesn't work, here's what does work. So these are the tips that she had. I'm going to go through each one of them briefly. So on the don't waste a minute, it sounds obvious, but she says prioritize and budget instructional time, and she said take the time to actually do the budget. She said figure out what you're doing on time. And so she said create a teaching checklist that prioritizes the activities on potential impact, and that was the key. So she had a lot of things to show this, but detailed feedback on instructional forums and detailed feedback on assignments and instructor participation in discussion forums were what students identified as said, this is the most valuable. Not what you think it is, instructor, this is what we think is. And she showed some graphs that showed how it was way askew. And the odds are, because I was guilty of this, I'm thinking like, ooh, what I thought was valuable, I don't think they thought was valuable. And so if you spend too much time, it's not going to do you any good. And it kind of gets to what Deepak was saying, if it doesn't benefit your students, then why are you doing it? So she actually threw this out as a possible way to budget, and she did throw out some things that shows where instructional time is placed, and this is where they came out. And for me, it doesn't work quite out that way per class, but for her, it did. So then she said, focus attention on one instructional activity at a time rather than jump between multiple tasks. And I think that was really good advice. Because if you just do a little here and then you go to something else, do a little there, it really doesn't work well. So the second one is, what is your return on investment? She said, prioritize teaching time investment to focus on high impact instructional activities. And she was saying that so many people, they spend so much time and they were spending all this time on something that really doesn't have that high impact. They might think it does, but it really might not. And then you've wasted your time. There is no value in spending time creating instructional resources that students will not use. And she spent a lot of time showing that, and that's where you get into your data, and you can find that from your own. You look at Canvas, look at the data, see what people are using, and it kind of is deflating sometimes when you realize like you spent all this time on this thing that you think is wonderful, and the students are like, okay. So that's what she's saying. So give them what they want, or at least what they will use, and then I ask for a PDF because I do have some of that. So then the return on investment, engage students as co-creators of content. So if you're working, my classes are all, they're graduate students, and most of them are teachers already, or some of them are already school principals. They're adults. And even though, a 19-year-old is going to say they're an adult, they're in a different world than somebody who maybe is 40. My people are not going to be as creator of content as maybe some people who are teaching undergraduates, is my point. So she said, check analytics and adjust. If you're doing something and you think, oh, this is fabulous, fabulous, it's so wonderful, and then you hit it and it's like 2% usage, you've wasted your time. Save, organize, and recycle instructional resources. You all do that, but then if you think about, how can I use this again? And that gets to some of the presentations today, like, what are we going to do that's more efficient? How do we save time? And then she said, settle on a sweet spot of 10 to 15% participation in discussions. I'll get to that more in a second. But don't try to overdo it. Don't think, I have to respond to everything. You can't. Streamline repetitive tasks. This really hit home for me. What do you find yourself saying or doing over and over again? So particularly like on discussion boards or on feedback of some assignments, figure out a way that you don't have to say the same thing 50 times, because it really takes a lot of time. And I find that in that law class when I'm responding to certain things, I go, gosh, I've said this so many times. There ought to be a better way to say the same thing to everybody and say it once. Shift from alliance to one-on-one feedback to one-to-many resources. She said, anticipate challenges, save time by creating frequently asked question resources, utilize push communication, which your students are going to want anyway, and design integrated individual learning so students may find resources without need of the instructor. And that is so key. I'm thinking, and I've heard this comment, like somebody said, so I don't get so many emails. Okay, that was, yeah, okay, that's it right there. They make it so they don't need you as much, because they want you, but they may not if they can find it somewhere else. This all made me think, anticipate challenges. What happened to me last semester, I live in Topeka. I teach a lot of my classes either from my basement Or I teach in the Topeka Library in some meeting rooms they have, and I was all ready for the last class of the semester, and I found out later the reason the power went out was because somebody hit a power pole with a car, and about an 8-square block was without power, and I couldn't do the class because no power. Power came back on, but then Wi-Fi took almost 45 minutes to get going. That was a challenge I didn't know how to deal with, okay? Limit supplemental technology. If you spend 80% of your time for 20% of the results, you're doing something wrong. How are you going to know this? You got to do your analytics. You got to figure out, have I done that this semester? Are they using this? And then adjust. If technology does not increase learning, foster engagement, or save you time, don't use it. So think, don't use technology for the sake of technology, okay? And then final tips. She said, embrace a holistic approach to efficiency, automate what you can, drill and practice, peer review helps, and people have mentioned that. Support resources when you put those in, integrated guidance, put those in your class, assignment support, and consistent structure. It helps when you get to teach the same class over, more than once, but you don't always have that luxury either. And I guess that's it. So I do have like I said, I have the PDF of all those papers, and I couldn't stress enough that that distance teaching and learning conference in Madison is really good. Okay, and you really learn a lot. And Flipgrid this year was like the most popular session. Like every Flipgrid session was jam-packed. And so like some of them were stand-up sessions and you couldn't even, there was 55 people standing around one person. So Flipgrid is really good. So thank you.